Hey friends, welcome back to the YouTube channel for the Renaissance English History Podcast. I am your host, Heather. I've been podcasting on Tudor England since 2009 with my show, which of course makes it the original Tudor History Podcast. And this channel is where I put all of my episodes from all of my shows, as well as tons of extra content like this video right here. Today, we are going to talk about the relationship between Thomas Cranmer and Thomas Cromwell. So this is another kind of Wolf Hall adjacent video. Last night in the US was the finale to The Mirror and the Light on PBS. This is the second time I've watched this because I watched it when it was on in the fall in the UK and did a whole series of Wolf Hall reaction videos, which you can check out somewhere. I'll put a link. So this is the second time I watched it, and I cried a lot the first time. I cried as well this time. It's just something about the pacing and the way it builds up, and I think that ending showing all of the different activities and reactions of all of the people, seeing Catherine Howard getting dressed in her wedding dress and Princess Mary's reaction and kind of just a little bit disgust, and Rafe Sadler crying and having his breakdown. Even Call Me Risley was having a hard time. Just all these people's reactions as Cromwell is being led to the scaffold, and whew, gets ya. So one thing I realized the last time I did these reaction videos, I haven't so far talked a whole lot about the relationship between Thomas Cranmer and Thomas Cromwell. These are the two men who were really the architects of the Henrician Reformation, of Henry's break with Rome. One side put into effect the legal framework, and the other was the theological framework. And then in this finale, they showed Cranmer having written a letter supporting Cromwell, and Cromwell was actually kind of surprised at how much he said, well, it's about as good as I could have hoped for, showing the support that Cranmer had for Cromwell at the end and his reaction. So I thought I would talk a little bit about these two men and also how Thomas Cranmer reacted to Thomas Cromwell's arrest and execution. So let's get into that. Before we do, though, of course, if you would like to see more Tudor history in your YouTube feed, who doesn't? Go ahead and hit subscribe now so you never miss a video that I put out. So when people think about the English Reformation, they usually picture Henry VIII, who of course was just larger than life. But behind him stood these two men who were much quieter in their own way, who did more than anyone else to actually build the new Church of England. And that would be Cromwell and Cranmer, two Thomases. I think I did a episode very early on in my podcast. I think it was around episode 7 or something from 2009, and it was called A Tale of Two Thomases, Cranmer and Cromwell. And I think then I did another one, A Tale of Two Thomases Part 2, and it was Wolsey, and I forget who the other one was. Anyway, so Cromwell and Cranmer, two Thomases. So these men didn't start off as natural allies. Cromwell came from the rough streets of Putney, the son of a brewer or a blacksmith, depending on who you asked. He made his way up through the hard school of European mercenary camps, merchant banking, and then legal work. Cranmer, by contrast, was a Cambridge scholar, mild, bookish, and very cautious by nature. Their paths first really crossed in the 1530s during Henry's increasingly desperate efforts to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, so very early 1530s. Cranmer, who had been involved in theological studies about marriage and divorce, caught Henry's eye when he proposed using university scholars to back up Henry's case instead of using the Pope. Cromwell, who was already working under Cardinal Wolsey, and then directly for Henry after Wolsey's fall, saw Cranmer's usefulness immediately. They weren't close friends. They didn't spend evenings drinking together or playing cards, but they trusted each other's judgment, and more importantly, they needed each other. Cromwell could manipulate Parliament and the law to force through the changes that Henry wanted, and Cranmer could give those changes the religious cover. He was the religious, theological side of things. They shared something even deeper. They shared a belief that England needed religious reform and that it had to happen carefully if it was going to survive Henry's unpredictable moods. The English Reformation wasn't something that happened with a lightning strike. You didn't just go to bed one night and wake up in the next morning you were Protestant. It took decades, 4 monarchs. Actually, you could make a case that even the English Civil War was a continuation of the Protestant Reformation in England. And there were phases. There was the first phase with Cromwell and Cranmer, and that's what we're going to talk about. And then there was the Elizabethan settlement. There was the Counter-Reformation under Mary I. There was Edward's Protestant moves. So it happened in multiple stages, right? It was a very dynamic thing. It didn't just happen. But Cromwell and Cranmer were the ones who were behind nearly all of the initial steps in the 1530s. Cromwell was Henry's vicegerent in spirituals, the man put in charge of church affairs, and he handled the dirty work, forcing monasteries to close, reorganizing the church finances, and writing laws like the Act of Supremacy in 1534 that formally declared Henry the head of the Church of England. Meanwhile, Cranmer laid the intellectual groundwork. As the Archbishop of Canterbury, he quietly steered the English religious thought away from Rome. It was Cranmer who oversaw the annulment of Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon. It was Cranmer who helped ease Henry's shifting theological positions into something vaguely Protestant without ever making Henry feel like he was becoming a Lutheran. They worked almost in tandem. Cromwell managed the politics and the practicalities. Cranmer crafted the religious arguments. And together they pushed forward reforms like the English Bible being placed in parish churches, changes to liturgy, and the beginning of the doctrinal shifts like the rejection of papal authority. And you see in the English Bible that Henry released, the Great Bible, you see Henry getting the word from the Lord and then giving it on one side to Cranmer, who passed it down to the clergy, then on the other side to Cromwell, who passed it down to the nobility, and then it all kind of trickled down through the different layers to the people at the bottom. Neither man moved faster than Henry allowed, but behind the scenes, they were building something far more radical than Henry even probably realized. In the summer of 1540, after years of carefully surviving Henry's moods, Cromwell finally misstepped. The marriage that he arranged between Henry and Anne of Cleves was a disaster from the moment Henry met her. By that point, Cromwell had also made too many enemies. Powerful nobles resented his low birth and his rapid rise, and conservatives at court were eager to roll back his Protestant-leaning reforms. On June 10th, Cromwell was arrested during a council meeting, dragged away without even being allowed to speak in his own defense. Most of his so-called allies scattered immediately, but Cranmer, normally the most cautious man at court, took an enormous risk. He wrote a letter directly to Henry VIII, almost pleading for Cromwell's life. In the letter, he didn't just defend Cromwell's character, he reminded Henry of how much Cromwell had done for him, pointing out that no one had served Henry's wishes with more energy or loyalty. But it was also like, I believed him to be this, but if he's really this, then who can you even trust anymore? And in fact, I will read you part of the letter right now. He says, I heard yesterday that in your grace's council that he, Cromwell, is a traitor. Yet who cannot be sorrowful and amazed that he should be a traitor against your majesty, that he who was so advanced by your majesty, he whose surety was only by your majesty, he who loved your majesty as I ever thought no less than God, he who studied always to set forwards whatever was your majesty's will and pleasure, that he who cared for no man's displeasure to serve your majesty, he that was such a servant in my judgment, in wisdom, diligence, faithfulness, and experience as no prince in this realm ever had, he that was so vigilant to preserve your majesty from all treasons, that few could be so secretly conceived, but he detected the same in the beginning. If the noble princes of memory, King John, Henry II, and Richard II, had all had such a counselor about them, I suppose that they should never have been so traitorously abandoned and overthrown as those good princes were. I loved him as my friend, for so I took him to be, but I chiefly loved him for the love which I thought I saw him bear ever towards your grace, singularly above all others. But now if he be a traitor, I am sorry that I ever loved him or trusted him, and am very glad that his treason is discovered in time. But yet again I am very sorrowful, for who shall your grace trust hereafter, if you must not trust him? Alas, I bewail and lament your grace's chance herein. I pray God continually night and day to send such a counselor in his place whom your grace may trust, and who for all his qualities can and will serve your grace like to him, and that will have so much solicitude and care to preserve your grace from all dangers as I ever thought he had. For a man like Cranmer, who was so cautious, that was a really big deal to have said all of that, to have defended his character, to have reminded him how much Cromwell had done for him. In some ways, Cranmer was almost putting his own neck on the line for this man who had been branded a traitor. Cranmer was really the only person who stuck up for Cromwell like that. Henry ignored it. Of course, Cromwell was executed on July 28, 1540. Cranmer's letter remains, and it's a record of true loyalty at a court where most people were really only ever loyal to their own survival. Of course, like Cromwell said in the episode itself, he has to temper all of the good stuff with, but if it's not true, then he's a traitor, then of course I'm very glad you found out about it. But he certainly went out of his way to list all of the good that Cromwell had done first. So after Cromwell's death, Cranmer must have known that he was more exposed than ever. The man who had protected the reformers, who could steer Henry's anger away from them, was gone. Cranmer survived, but he did so in a much more precarious world. Still, that letter to Henry shows something very rare, not just political calculation, but real loyalty. Cranmer and Cromwell had built the English Reformation side by side, brick by brick. In the end, Cranmer couldn't save him, but he sort of tried when almost no one else did. And in Henry's world, that kind of loyalty was almost unheard of. So I would love to know what you think. Was Cranmer's loyalty genuine, or was it a survival strategy? Should he have done more? Could he have done more? Let me know in the comments what you think. So I would also love to know what you thought about the series as well. I just love it. It's just poetry. It's just so beautiful. All right. If you have made it this far in the video and you enjoyed it, I sure would appreciate it. Press that like button. You know what it does. It helps to feed the algorithm and get our content to even more people. I hope I earned your subscription to my channel if you're not already subscribed, where I put out videos like this on the regular. If you would like to keep binging Wolf Hall reaction videos and Thomas Cromwell content, here is that playlist that I mentioned of all of the reaction videos that I did back when Wolf Hall was on in the UK in the fall and this time as well. And here's a video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, you are deeply loved. I am so glad I share the planet with you. I will be back very soon. Don't forget to drink your water. All right, friend. Bye-bye.